Your ancestors were afraid of the dark, not metaphorically, literally. Step outside the firelight at night. You die. Leopards, hyenas, wolves, all of them could see perfectly in the dark. You couldn't. That circle of firelight, maybe 30 feet across, was the only safe place on Earth after sunset, and every single night, your ancestors sat inside it together for hours, with nowhere to go and nothing to do. What happened inside that circle changed our species forever. The oldest evidence of humans controlling fire comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, roughly 1 million years ago. Before fire, the useful day ended at sunset, maybe 12 hours in summer, as few as 8 in winter. When the sun went down, you found shelter and stayed still. Moving at night meant becoming food. Fire changed that overnight. Literally, a campfire doesn't just provide warmth, it buys time, too. Sometimes 4 extra hours every single day that no other primate had. Hours with no hunting to do, no gathering, no immediate survival task demanding attention. Just people, sitting together, in the light. Over thousands of generations, those hours became the most important hours of the day, not because of what people had to do during them, because of what they chose to do. Anthropologist Polly Weisner spent decades recording conversations among the Johoansi of the Kalahari, one of the last groups on Earth still living close to the original human pattern. The data came back almost perfectly split. During the day, 80% of conversations were practical. Who's hunting where? Which plants are ready? Complaints, disputes, logistics. Daytime talk was work. At night, 81% flipped. Stories, laughter, songs, memory. Same people, same day. Completely different world. But Weisner didn't just count the conversations. She sat inside them. One night she watched an elder, a man in his 70s, perform a story about a lion hunt. Not tell it. Perform it. He stood up. He moved his body. He made the sounds. The camp had heard versions of this story before. They laughed at the right moments. Anyway, at the far edge of the firelight, 3 children who had no business still being awake were sitting completely still, eyes wide, not making a sound. Nobody told them to come closer. They just crept in, the way children do when something real is happening. Anthropologist Richard Lee noticed something else happening after dark. During the day, status was visible. The best hunter carried himself differently. Elders commanded deference. Young men were careful about who they challenged. Then the fire came on. Lee watched the best hunter in camp sit down next to the worst gatherer and share a joke at his own expense. He watched young men openly tease their fathers, men they'd spent all day deferring to. He watched an elder perform a story about his most humiliating failure, playing it for laughs. The whole camp roaring. This wasn't accidental. A band where one person starts to feel genuinely superior is a band that fractures. The fire was where that pressure got released. Every night, the hierarchy that held during daylight hours quietly dissolved into shared warmth and laughter. Darkness was a social technology. The most stable groups weren't the ones with the best hunters or the most food. They were the ones that laughed together every night. At some point during all of this, the children fell asleep, not because anyone told them to. Anthropologist Carol Worthman at Emory University found that in forager societies, children had no fixed bedtime. None. A child stayed up as long as they could hold their eyes open. When sleep finally won, they simply tipped sideways into the nearest adult, gathered up without ceremony, folded into the sleeping mass of bodies around the fire. No negotiations. No battles. No 5 more minutes. The child was never alone. Sleep arrived inside a warm, noisy, social world, voices continuing around them, fire crackling. Someone's heartbeat close. That's the environment human children fell asleep in for hundreds of thousands of years. The silent, dark, isolated bedroom is a very recent invention. And even now, most children will tell you exactly how they feel about it. They've always known something was missing. The adults didn't simply go to bed either. Historian Roger Ekirch spent 16 years digging through pre-industrial records, diaries, court documents, medical texts, letters from ordinary people spanning 5 centuries. What he found, documented across more than 500 references, was something nobody expected. For most of human history, people didn't sleep in one continuous block. They slept for a few hours after dark, then woke naturally, right around midnight, stayed up for an hour or two, then slept again until dawn. They even had a name for it. The middle waking was called the watch. People used it to pray, to talk quietly with a partner, to think through a problem. A Dodgers manual from the 1500s described it as the best time to study and reflect, when the mind was calm and the world was still. This wasn't insomnia. This wasn't a disorder. This was just Tuesday. In 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Baer at the National Institute of Mental Health decided to test something. He took a group of volunteers and removed all artificial light from their lives. Complete darkness for 14 hours every night. Just like our ancestors before fire extended the evening. Within weeks, every single participant shifted into the same pattern. First sleep, a quiet waking in the middle of the night. Second sleep, nobody told them to do this. Nobody suggested it. Their bodies just did it, as if some ancient program had been waiting inside them the whole time, buried under centuries of artificial light. But here's the part that stayed with researchers. Baer measured their hormone levels during that middle waking and found something he didn't expect. The participants were producing elevated levels of prolactin, the same hormone released during deep meditation, the same hormone released after orgasm. They described the state as peaceful, reflective, almost otherworldly. It wasn't just a gap in sleep. It was its own distinct state of consciousness, one that most modern humans have never experienced. And we didn't lose it gradually. We flicked a switch, and it was gone. The answer is simpler than you'd think. Light. In the 1600s, cities began installing street lamps. Paris was first, under Louis XIV, who wanted to reduce crime. London followed, then cheaper candles, then gas lamps. Then, in 1879, Edison commercialized the electric light bulb. And within a generation, the night as humans had known it for 300,000 years was over. Here's one detail worth knowing. The word curfew comes from the French couvre-feu. It literally means cover fire. In medieval towns, a bell would ring at night signaling everyone to extinguish their fires, because night was supposed to be dark. Night was when you slept. Night was when you were vulnerable. Being outside after dark without a lantern was, in many cities, literally illegal. Now your phone screen produces more light at midnight than most medieval towns saw in a week. Your brain cannot tell the difference. When light hits your retina at 11 p.m., your body interprets it as noon. Melatonin suppressed. Sleep fragmented. The rhythm that took hundreds of thousands of years to build, disrupted in a single generation. Go back to that circle of firelight, 30 feet of safety, and an ocean of dark. An elder on his feet, making the sounds, telling the story everyone already knows. 3 children at the edge of the light, sitting perfectly still, not making a sound. That image is 300,000 years old, and every single night, without realizing it, you recreate it. The show you stay up too late watching, the podcast playing softly in a dark room, the long conversation that starts at midnight and somehow runs to 2 a.m., the phone screen held above a face that should be sleeping. You're not fighting sleep because you lack discipline. You're sitting at the fire. And if you wake up at 2 a.m. and lie there in the quiet, that's not your body malfunctioning. That's the watch. That's the most peaceful state of consciousness your species ever found. Still running. Every night, waiting for you to stop treating it like a problem. The darkness hasn't changed. The fire is just a different shape now.